Warmly welcome to the afternoon program of today's conference. The upcoming two presentations will touch on the topic of communication and self-organization, two keywords that are so desired and so misused by many teams and companies today. Our first speaker describes himself as a versatile and experienced professional with over a decade of experience in agile environment. He worked in different roles. So he worked as a developer, technical expert, manager, process consultant. He also has a lot of experience when it comes to agile transformations. Please give a warm welcome to Deepak Dhananjaya. Today, Deepak will deliver a talk entitled, "Do you talk about the elephant in the room? What is that elephant and how to avoid that?" Let us give our full attention to that speech. Deepak, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Luke, for such a warm welcome. Good day, good afternoon, wherever all of you are seeing from. I'm from Bangalore, India, and I'm quite excited to be part of this conference and presenting and listening. Such a stimulating conference it's been for me. I'm not best on digital mode, especially when I don't see the audience. So you will see me seeing stars, and that's fine. I will survive it. And hopefully we'll have more engagement through this conversation. Yeah. What is the elephant in the room? Because let's think of a situation when you have walked into a room and when you found yourself in a place, in a situation where something is wrong, something is off, and nobody is talking. You don't know what that is. Yeah? And in some situations, think of a place where you are with somebody and something is going on, but nothing is said in the open. And that is the elephant in the room. The elephant is that which is not spoken about, unexpressed and unspoken feelings and thoughts about each other. Yeah? And I hope that gives you a fair understanding of what elephant we're talking about, right? I think it's important for us to know things which are difficult to speak is not spoken and covered up. And that is the danger. Yeah? So why should we talk about it? If there's an elephant in the room, why should we speak about it? Because the elephant will keep growing. Trust me, it can go bigger than our imagination, right? And remember, human beings are very imaginative people, okay? We can imagine many things. If I just say, for example, if I'm part of your team and I say, you know what, something happened between my boss and me, each one of you, if 4 of you are there with me, each one of you can imagine what that could be. Some of you can think that, oh, I had a fight with my boss. Or some of you can think that my boss proposed me. Or it could be something else, right? Depending on our own frame of reference and view, we may start imagining things. And that's a big danger, right? We don't want people to assume, and that can grow bigger and bigger, and that a story can be built from nowhere. And I think that's why it's important to talk about it and not let the elephant grow. And why is it relevant in agile teams? Yeah, because according to me, agile teams are formed to create a cohesive culture based on openness to feedback, communicate and reflect, have direct communication, transparent interaction and information flow. So we build on transparency, right? And then we also want to be authentic. We also want to develop authenticity in the team, right? And if you look at any agile principles, right? If you look at any agile frameworks, it could be Scrum, it could be Kanban, it could be anything. It's based on some form of openness, some form of transparency, direct communication. If you look at our ceremonies that are involved, we talk about Scrum, stand-up meetings, retrospective, where open communication is fostered. We encourage open communication. But the question is, do we really do it? Yeah. I have worked with teams which do all the ceremonies according to a framework perfectly fine, but end up not being an effective agile team. That's because we don't talk about some of the elephants in the room. If I don't like somebody's performance, we often don't say it directly, right? And that's a problem. And that's exactly what agile says. You should talk about challenges and difficulties that we have within the team, because it belongs in the team, right? And that's why it's relevant for me as an agile coach to bring this aspect. Yeah? Let's look at what happens when there is when we don't talk about the elephant and the elephant keeps growing, right? Psychological distance is created between people. Yeah, when I feel far from you psychologically, then that much difficult it is for me to have a good communication flow between me and you. And imagine when we are together working on a single project, it's important for us to keep the communication flow smoother. Yeah, so psychological distance gets impacted. And I'm not for a second saying you need to be best friends with your team members. That's not what I'm encouraging. What I'm saying is being best friends is a byproduct of working effectively and openly and authentically, right? And I think what I'm really wanting to stress is being authentic is not necessarily being pleasant. Yeah, and I think that's what we want. Having a good communication flow is not about keeping everybody happy. I think that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about psychological distance, right? And the elephant keeps growing, then it impacts the trust in the team. We've all seen that, right? We see that we don't trust fully. We try to be guarded. We try to be defended sometimes. We try to hold on to a logical idea of our own version of implementation or a solution, right? Lack of open communication. And then biggest thing is gossips. We think gossips are not so harmful, but they are harmful, right? Because it's really creating a hole in the team. Yeah, it creates subgroups in the team, and having subgroups is not so helpful. Okay? And it creates judgments. When the elephant grows, like I said, we create assumptions and we make assumptions and we hold judgments on some people, and that's very dangerous because we'll start making an assumption about some people and see them through that lens. We use positional power irrationally. Yeah? Sometimes because of the elephant, nobody is talking about, we want to use the power to take charge and take control. It leads to misunderstandings. It creates a very unsafe environment. Look what just happened, right? We created a scrum team, but then because elephants are not spoken and many elephants can be in the room, and then it just becomes a non-agile team, but doing agile practices. That won't make it any effective. And I think that's why it's important for us to take care of it in a self-organized team, in an agile team. Yeah? I don't have any way to check whether you're getting it, but I'm assuming right now that you're getting it, and then we're just moving. Yeah. Let's look at why does elephant walk into the room first of all, right? Let's look at just human behaviors, how we are formed. Okay. If you see two triangles that I've put, and I put a line which says it's a tip of the triangle. Okay. If I was a good artist, I would have written a volcano here, or I would have written an iceberg. Yeah, tip of the iceberg is what we behave and what we say. What I say is what you see. What you say and behave is what I see, right? But what is the beneath, what is driving that behavior is a set of feelings, attitudes, beliefs, values, our ethics, conditioning, our own life experiences has led to certain patterns of behavior. Take a moment and think, do we all not have patterns of behaviors in certain situations? When we feel attacked, we have a certain way of responding to people. When we're excited, we have a certain way to respond. When we feel like we have to present something, we have a certain way of behaving. In a conflict, we have a certain way of behaving. So these are all patterns that we have developed over many years. Yeah, but people don't experience what is internal to us. Yeah, and they only experience what we say and what we do, not what makes us say and what makes us act the way we do. It'll get a little clearer from the next slide, because one of my very dear colleague Amit Matu told me once when we were co-facilitating. He said, we judge others by their behaviors and ourselves by intent. And that's so powerful, isn't it? When we do something and when somebody misunderstands me, we often say that, hey, that was not my intention. But we don't for a moment think that when we experience something from other person, that may not be their intent, right? We assume based on our frame of reference their behavior. Let me take an example. Okay, if I see somebody shouting at me, for a moment I will not think what their intent of shouting at me was. Yeah, I immediately say they're rude, they're arrogant, and they're a bully, right? Which is fair enough. I'm not justifying their arrogance, but we only see their behavior. We don't look at, because that's not accessible for us, right? And similarly, when I do something, when I start getting anxious, or when I start um, doing some behavior which is not pleasant, what others see is just my behavior. They don't know why I'm doing it unless they engage with me on why. And to build psychological distance, to bridge that psychological distance, to be authentic, we need to get to the level at feelings, attitudes, and beliefs. Yeah. So, for example, if a friend is shouting at me, I would stop and ask, "What's making you shout? Can we have a dialogue? What's bothering you?" Yeah. But we don't do that because we are caught up in our own frame of reference, right? We get activated from our own response to that kind of a behavior of a friend, right? Or a colleague, right? Because we think, oh, he's arrogant or he's rude, so there's no point talking to him. So we make these formation of ideas of other person, and others are making the same formation and ideas of us, and we're constantly dealing with the ideas and not real us. So to in an agile team, it's or especially in an agile team, any team for that matter, but I'm stressing because it's an agile conference and we're talking about self-organizing teams, it's extremely important for us to connect at this level, right? I briefly started talking about what stops us from talking about the elephant in the room. It's not like we don't know, right? It's not a new concept. Because when we walk into a room, we feel a tension, but we feel, okay, something is not right. And we don't talk about it. But what stops us? Fear of being judged. Yeah. It's extremely scary, yeah, to be misunderstood. Yeah. Fear of thinking that, oh, somebody will judge me by asking. Yeah. If I say what's bothering you, somebody may say that, why are you nosy? What's your problem? Okay, that's one of the fear which stops us from talking about the elephant. Fear of rejection and disappointment, right? What if I say something and it's too hurtful for the other person, and they reject me, they isolate me, or label me? Yeah. So in the very initial years of my experience when I was working as a coach, every time I attend and bring up something, they would say, here he goes. So let's not talk in front of him, right? That fear is extremely very, very valid because we don't want to be isolated in teams. So that's another fear which stops us from talking about the elephant. Another main important, which in my own experience of being a psychotherapist and a coach for organization, I've seen is fear of intimacy. Yeah. In organization, especially, we've told that keep your professional lives and personal lives separate. Yeah. And if we start connecting authentically, then I have to be myself. I can't be somebody else. I can't pretend to be somebody else. So when I'm myself, I don't know whether people will like me. And that fear is very, very crucial. We need to acknowledge it. And it's also messy, right? It's not easy because all of these conversations talking about the elephant is not easy. It's going to be messy because it's going to be difficult because you're going to challenge your own frame of reference. You're inviting the other person to challenge their own frame of reference, and you're fighting with your own beliefs and fighting with your own internal world to engage. So it's not easy. It isn't. It's like working out. Yeah, I recently started working out, and my trainer keeps saying, "Come on, you need to be regular. Otherwise, you won't get what you want if you're not regular." And exactly that's how it is when we're developing this new skill of talking about the elephants in the room. Yeah. How do we call it? how do we talk about the elephant in the room? Yeah? Just call it out. Yeah, and that's the first step. Just acknowledge it. Yeah. What do I mean? Just call it out. If you see something is going on between two people or in the team or between you and somebody else, just to say, hey, something, I sense something is off. So let's just take a pause and reflect what's going on. And that's not as simple as I say it, right? Because we have to fight our own internal image and ideas of what it is to be um, engaging in a messy conversation or talking about the elephant in the room. So I think just calling out is important step. And there is also what I'm going to introduce a concept called psychological contracts. Psychological contracts was first formulated by Eric Berne in 1961. He was the founder of transactional analysis. He said transactional analysis is social psychology, a framework of social psychology. His belief was we can understand ourselves better when we are in interaction with others. Yeah? So he developed a concept called psychological contracts, and which I will talk a little bit about. Yeah? What is psychological contracts? It's about way of establishing trust and connecting authentically in the teams or between two people. Yeah, I'll give you some examples, and then we can talk a little more about what does it do, right? Remember, if I go back to the slide of the triangle, psychological contracts gives us a space to establish below the surface of feelings, attitudes, beliefs, ethics, and conditioning and experience. We're connecting at that level, right? So first one is just to call it out, like I said, yeah, to say that you may not know exactly what's going on, but to say that I sense some tension in the room. Can we talk about it? Sorry. Then validate your assumption. Yeah. Ask sometimes, most of the times, our engagement is based on assumptions. Yeah. So I would invite for us to, every time when we feel the impulse to respond to something difficult, yeah, to pause and ask if it's an assumption and clarify it. Yeah. To say that when you behave, for example, when I say to a friend, when you behave like this, I assume this. Is my assumption right? If it's not, what is the reason for your behavior? What's going on? We don't do this often, isn't it? It's very difficult because we are caught up in the response to how to respond to that person being rude to me or attacking me, right? Clarify your behavior. Yeah, when somebody feels defensive of what you're saying and it's difficult, you can always clarify. You know what? Why I'm saying this because of my intention and nothing else. If you're assuming something else, please clarify. Invite for a clarification from the other person. So it builds that connection of challenging the frames of references. Yeah. Another important thing which we don't do in organization is feedback loop. Not in terms of this, you did good and bad, but about the impact. Yeah. Like I was working with a group and this product owner would come and just say, well, we have given this so much luxury of time and still this is not completed in quality and blah, blah, blah. And his content was right. What he was saying was absolutely bang on. He had reasons for what he was saying, but how he was saying was terrible. Yeah. Remember, he used his positional power because he was very anxious about delivery and he would be asked. So his behavior was getting loud and then attacking people and pinpointing mistakes. And then he didn't know how it impacted people. So when we started talking about, hey, when we help the team to say, you know what, the product owner, when you do this, it impacts us like this. So they started saying it impacts us like we are not doing our work, or you're not listening to what you're saying, and we feel demotivated. You know what? That feedback loop helps the person to reflect on how the behavior is impacting. And then it gave him an opportunity to say, you know what? When you're not delivering with quality and when you don't tell me when there is delay, I'm put in an awkward spot. And that's why I get very angry. And I feel I don't know how else to do it. But you see, he didn't do it before we stopped and asked him to share the impact. So sharing the impact has tremendous value, which we discount. Yeah? These were some of the case examples I was giving you. And there are ways to proactively set up psychological contracts when the team is new or any part of the team's life. Yeah, to talk about some of the contracts like this. What is my motivation? What motivates me to be part of this team? What are my apprehensions to be part of this team? How do I deal with? How do we, as a team, deal with interpersonal issues? Or what will make me lose interest in this team? Yeah. Do I feel like I can be trusted in this team? How will we deal with disagreements? How will we handle conflicts? How can we extend support to each other? How will we share disappointments, expectations, and what behaviors of mine can sabotage the task we are doing, and how can we prevent that? You see, what we're doing by this is we are putting our vulnerable self openly and engaging with other people's vulnerable self. And automatically, that gives an opportunity for us to connect at the deeper level. And remember, it's not about being best friends, it's about being authentic. Yeah. And I've worked with many colleagues of mine who I'm not at all friends. I don't like to go out for a drink with them, but we have been excellent team workers. Yeah. Because we have set up psychological contracts like that. And psychological contracts is not about one time, it's not an event, it's an ongoing process. Every time you see a difficulty, every time you see a confusion, stop and see what is the elephant in the room that we're not talking about. Yeah. It could be small thing like, hey, I thought you will set up the time calendar for this meeting. So we didn't send out a calendar. The elephant in the room was an assumption, yeah, that somebody will set it up, and nobody had clarified, right? To bigger thing that two people fighting and make it look like a very intellectual conversation. Have you all had experience? I'm sure we all have seen in teams. Two people are fighting, actually fighting, but they are talking in a way that it looks like intellectual conversation or debating on a solution. But all of us know it's not just about the solution, it's about the fight, right? And I think that's the point to say, hey, stop and look at what's going on. Yeah? I'm hoping if you're listening so far, then you've got a sense of what's happening, why it's important in the teams, especially agile teams. Yeah? What we shouldn't do when we are doing psychological contracts. We should never do yes butting. Yes butting is very commonly used in our transaction analysis field. It's a way of negating politely what you're saying. Yeah? For example, I say, you know what, why don't we try out a different solution? And the other person says, yes, I think it's a nice idea, but let's do it this way. What is he essentially saying is, I don't really care about your first thing. I'm being polite, so I will agree to you by saying yes. And I will negate the whole thing by saying but. Yeah. And this is quite cultural, right? It's not nice for us to be rude, so we will say it like this. But the impact of this is we will never get to a fruitful conversation because we are guarded with our own ideas. And remember, sometimes what happens is we think it's only a language issues. No, it's an unconscious learned behaviors. It's not just about using yes, but yes, but can be done in many, many ways in different languages. Yeah. When we're talking about psychological contracts, inviting the person to be reflective, we don't know, we shouldn't get into justification mode. Yeah. Well, you know what, why I did this and blah, 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 blah. No, listen to the person, how they felt. Yeah, because that's what will help you get into the deeper level of connect. And of course, being close to reflect and they're getting defensive. Yeah. To say in your minds that what the person is saying, I don't care really. I'll just listen and then go out. That doesn't help. Yeah. Or get into who was right and who was wrong. It's really not about right and wrongs. And over many years of experience working with people, I realized that there is no really a right and a wrong. Even a fact is seen as perspective, right? A scooter hit me versus I ran into the scooter. the same fact, but said two different ways. So it has a different feeling, emotion elicited in each people, right? So it's extremely important not to do into fact finding. Yeah. So I'm coming to closer of my talk, which is what does it help in building? It helps in building authentic connections, builds respect, trust, and reduces psychological distances. When all of this happens, automatically the elephant will walk out of the room or at least shrink in the size. Yeah. I think I have 5 more minutes, if I'm right. Yeah, cool. So I want to share an example quickly that I worked with a team. Yeah, I worked with an organization where there was a lot of conflict in the team, in the design and the front end team. Yeah, it's a self-organized team, but that subgroups were. When I walked into the first meeting, I felt there's something wrong. Yeah, they were talking very nicely and very politely, but I knew there's something wrong. Yeah, and I started to experience that there is more to what they're saying than just talking. And on inquiry, I understood there are unexpressed emotions between these teams. Yeah. Long story short, we facilitated a conversation between them, asking for, okay, what was happening for them? Yeah. So front end team said that design team does not respect their inputs, and they feel excluded in their process, and this impacted their interaction with the design members. Design team felt that front-end team often dismisses their designs using technical blockages as reason, and they felt undervalued. You know, that's a loaded word, and that never comes out in open, isn't it? Unless we stop and reflect. And this was based purely on assumption. And then we continued the facilitation when we started establishing some contracts. Yeah. When we asked them to draw a psychological distance, they were really far from other team members. Yeah. Then we asked, what do you think really about the disagreements, yeah, between each of you? They were surprised to listen about how they were assuming that they were disrespecting each other. Yeah. And then what we set up was, okay, we set up a rhythm between both of you every week, 30 minutes, to talk about just how did you impact each other. And that gave a lot of space for them to say, you know what, when you said this is how I felt. There's no talk about my design or my front end code. It's only about the impact. And 30 minutes was just about that. Every week I facilitated with them. And we saw automatically in few weeks, they were not the best friends, but the effectiveness had certainly improved with the team. Right? I think that's what the key is. We think just implementing a Scrum or a Kanban is going to make the team agile, but no, we have to fix the way we see the elephants in the room. We need to build a bridge for open, transparent communication. I think that's extremely important. Yeah. And there is some. Now, I want you to go back to the situation where you felt, where I asked you to think about a team or a place or a situation where you felt like there was something wrong and nobody's talking. And what invitation is, what would you do at that time? Yeah. And that brings to closure of my conversation. It's been lovely presenting this talk, and I'm hoping that you have some questions, reflections, and there's some reading material which I can send it to the organizing team later. And if you have any questions, you can write. I'm going to stop share for question answer session. Thank you.
Awesome, Deepak. Thank you very much for this very intriguing talk with a lot of interesting examples and also a lot of things from your experience. We have quite a few questions that could be asked. So let's maybe start from the very first one. It says, isn't this a common sense? It sounds simple. Why making a topic out of this?
Yeah, it is. It seems common sense. What happens, Luke, in this process is we are all products of conditioning, right? And growing up, we are told not to be rude, and we are told to be careful about what people think, and we are told to be watchful, and all kind of conditions have gone in, and for right reasons. I'm not commenting that. And biggest conditioning that's happened in the era that we developed as professionals was to keep our professional lives and personal lives separate, right? And what it has translated into is my emotions is personal life and my logic is professional life. So I'll walk into the team or offices just with my logic and keep my emotions outside, right?
Mm.
And that's one of the biggest things. Because of these conditions, we stop from having these conversations. Yeah. And what we're doing today is just to challenge these conditions and have an engaging conversations. It is common sense, but it's difficult to implement it. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Thanks a lot for your answer. And we have also a very similar question about how to mitigate maybe this problem. The question is, can we somehow avoid that elephant, meaning the communication issues, by hiring the right people that fit the company's culture? So how about
Certainly,
hiring good people that basically do not have these problems with communication?
it's an interesting question, and I'm smiling because I'm also a psychotherapist. So, being a mental health professional and a coach, I don't think there are that you can know who's the good people or bad people, right? That's the first response. And you can do a criteria to hire the culture. Of course, that's important to see whether the person is fit into the culture or not. Yeah. But let me tell you one fact that I've seen in best of the companies that I've worked with, smallest and the biggest of the organizations, when you put two people together, there is going to be chaos because we are not machines and we are not intentionally wanting to create a problem, right? So we cannot avoid the elephant in the room because just because of the complex nature of human beings, because we, like I said, I see yellow and something evokes in me. Somebody sees yellow and something evokes in them, and it can be completely different. So it's not about finding the right people. It's about having the dialogue, creating a space in the organization to have such conversations. I think that's my answer. You can't avoid the elephant. If two people are
Mhm.
there, elephant will come one day or the
Okay.
other. It'll explode. So you be better keep it at check so that the elephant doesn't explode.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Yeah, so being aware of this elephant definitely helps.
Yeah.
But then there is also a very interesting question. So you talked about the psychological contracts, and the question is how to recover from the violation of the psychological contract, how to bring employees' trust back in case it was violated.
Like, it's a very important question. Like I briefly mentioned, contracting is not one-time event. It's not like
Mhm.
today I will do and it's written on stone, right? It's not like that. So because of complex nature, we may miss that, right? And when we see a violation, we again call for a meeting and we say, hey, you know what? We missed a psychological contract. Can we talk about what happened and how can we avoid this without going into blame? I think that's the tricky part. Hey, you missed this. Well, you did a wrong. You had to pay fine. Not like that.
Mhm.
And I don't endorse that kind of a interrogation, but I like the idea of creating a space. Okay, we did agree on this. We did agree that everybody will come on time, but what happened? What's happening? We're seeing regularly people are not turning up, involving, and there's a duality in the conversation. I think that's important. Yeah. So I would say violations apart, because when you have a contract, it's going to be and a process and not just an event. So we need to keep building. So when there's a violation, it's not good. It's not an important idea to think it's a failure. It's not. It's a step for deepening the trust. I would think like that. The more you do this, the more the trust builds in the team and organization.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. So I guess that was the last question we had for this. So Deepak, we would like to thank you very much for your very interesting talk and also for answering those questions during this Q&A session. And obviously, we would like to also kindly request the audience to go to the channel. There will be a link to leave the feedback and to leave the feedback for Deepak about this talk.